The education system used to perform only a conservative function in the past. It was used as an instrument for social control and maintenance of social order. The education system has the limited aim of transmitting the traditional skills to the new generation. But in a rapidly changing society, education seeks to bring about all-round development. It is now seen as an instrument to address the issues of education in general and in particular with respect to quality, equity, physical, economic, social, cultural, linguistic, particularly girl, child and weaker section and differently abled. The National Policy on Education 1986 and the revised NPE 1992 enforces the urgency to address the quality concerns in education on priority basis. Quality cannot improve by itself. It requires reforms in teacher training, improvements in the school facilities and infrastructure in schools, teacher motivation and a change in the style of teaching to make it attractive to the students. The interstate and intrastate variations in school facilities, quality of teachers and learning outcome are large, and so are social and economic conditions of the areas where the primary school operate. While indicators to measure the access, retention and internal efficiency of the educational system in terms of participation rate, accessibility, repetition rates, promotion rates, dropout rates and input-output ratio have been developed, but little information is available about the learner's achievement of cognitive and non-cognitive competencies. Merely providing adequate infrastructure, teaching learning material, adequate teaching and non-teaching staffs, providing conducive atmosphere in the school for learning are not sufficient requirements towards the quality education. Along with this, components of the curriculum, that is syllabus, pedagogy, examination, affiliation and accreditation standards are also important factors which need to be addressed while dealing with quality issues in education. There are some of the basic items covered under the study to understand the quality concern in education as they influence the entire school education system, such as first one is infrastructure. Under this category, the items like classroom, blackboard, drinking water and toilet facilities and availability of playgrounds have been studied. Next comes the physical environment. Under this category, the items like school boundary, distance of the school from the place of residence, school surroundings and appearance of the school from inside are studied. Next is teaching aids. The school should have some sorts of teaching aids like OHP, computers, etc. Next is the school dynamics. Under school dynamics, the subjects like teaching strategy, student feedback system, student performance and teacher's attitude should be taken into consideration. Next comes the quality parameters. In this category, the overall performance of the teacher in the schools, how frequently teachers are getting training, how much teachers are satisfied with the teaching learning process in the school and students' perception about the school have to be studied. Next is the work culture. Under this, the discipline in the schools have to be studied. It is found that in terms of work culture, IB stands better than the other three categories of schools. The work culture of Delhi government school is poorer than the CBSE and CISCE schools. Next is monitoring and supervision. Under this category, monitoring and supervision of the schools by community and their participation in the school activity, monitoring and supervision of the teaching learning activities. This system has rapidly expanded and the governments were not prepared to handle the situation. The teacher training and recruitments do not keep pace with the rapidly expanding enrollments, the complex classroom situations and the diverse learners' needs. Mass education brought children to classrooms from diverse socio-economic backgrounds. Most of the rural and government schools had children coming from extremely poor economic conditions, first generation learners differently abled from differing social orders. Added to these complex classroom situations, most of the remote and rural schools face teacher shortages resulting in multi-grade teaching. The one or at the most two teachers working in such schools are unprepared to handle the existing complex classrooms and further demotivated when they have to go in for multi-grade teaching. Each teacher in such a situation on average manage 4 to 5 classes. In such a situation, it is important that our teacher education programs be restructured, including at least the two important components discussed above, that is, managing diversity and managing multi-grade situations. These problems are rarely covered in the training programs either pre-service or in-service. The present-day teachers lack the skill to manage the increasing diversity and the resultant complex classroom situations. Most of the in-service programs focus on the generic skills and do not provide any value addition to the would-be teachers. Further, if we have to match the requirements of the schools and the teachers who work in them, the training program should be designed in consultation and participation of the teachers and not just by the teacher educators and administrators. India has another peculiar situation which impact the performance of our teachers. That is, the school teacher has multiple roles to perform. The idiosyncratic orders of the governments result in teachers to be a social worker, an advocacy agent for various government policy initiatives, a field worker and implementer, a polling agent, a health worker, a flood relief worker, distributing aids, and so goes on the list. This is the environment in which 90% of rural teachers work. In such a situation, what is the quality of teaching learning that we expect from a teacher? How do we come out of this situation? A situation where there is no aspiration for professional growth on the part of the teacher, inadequate infrastructure and human resources, inadequate time, and of all, poor human resource management strategies. We require a real researching of ourselves, a retrospection of our actions, and a revisioning of the systems and the profession. Teachers are the core of any school and thus their role in quality improvement becomes a paramount. Let us see how teachers can contribute to improve school quality. There are issues which are relevant to the context of teachers' contribution to quality schooling. In that, the first one is self-evaluation, next comes the ethics and values, and the third one is continuous learning and professional development. Learning environment includes the conditions, both physical and socio-emotional, available for children that enhances learning. It includes not only availability of facilities but also the extent to which they are utilized. There is no denying of the fact that physical facilities, namely building, instructional rooms, teaching learning materials, disabled friendly environment, etc. are essential to create a learning environment for effective schooling. Basically, collegiality and collaboration are important conditions for unity of this purpose. Research has shown that schools are more effective when staff build consensus on the aims and values of the schools and where they put into the practice through consistent and collaborative way of working and of decision making. This is partly in the hands of head teachers. One of the factors that is related to the interrelationships between students and teachers is positive expectations of pupil achievement among teachers and parents. In particular, low expectations of certain kinds of student have been identified as an important factor in the underachievement of students in disadvantaged urban schools. Experience shows that most of the educational institutions have been overwhelmed by the demand of the better facilities, and while coping with the demand, they missed out the quality. Traditional approaches to teaching has been replaced by modern methods and technology-enabled teaching. But the mad rush and cutthroat competition for higher grades had resulted in the loss of human qualities among educators. Gender refers to the socially learned attitudes and behaviors associated with being male or female. A gender role is the behavior expected of a female or a male in a particular culture, the attitudes and activities that the society expects of each sex. The only role related to sex are those associated with reproduction, male and female contribution to the transfer of genetic material. Further, women give birth and breastfeed, activities assigned to female on the basis of socially determined characteristics such as stereotypes, ideologies, values, attitudes, beliefs and practices are also defined. Gender relations are relations of dominance and subordination with elements of cooperation, force, violence sustaining them. Gender relations are socially constructed and hence variable in time and place and amenable to change. Gender relationships follow the rules of patriarchy, an ideology and social system whereby men are considered superior to women. According to the patriarchal structure in Indian context, where male chauvinism rules and regulates gender relation in power structure of the society. Patriarchy means rules of father or patriarch. Further, it can be extended to all forms of male domination in the world inside and outside the family. The origin of this word patriarchy was coined to define a specific type of male dominated structure in the society and how it channelized through social institutions like family or joint family of the patriarch, which included women, younger men, children, slaves and domestic servants, all under the rule of this dominant male. But nowadays, this used in the discourse of inequality, male versus female towards the power relationship existence and creating hierarchical structure in the society. This social system classifies women as a subordinate or secondary position which moves their stake at next level. In totality, it does not imply women are totally powerless or fully deprived of rights, influence or resources. It points to power relationships and structure by which men dominate women in various ways through regulations of social institutions, that is family, community, religion and caste. Feminist denotes patriarchy by manifestation and institutionalization of male dominance over women and children in family and its extension in society by control of women. This control of women is channelized through power and position defined by various sociologists and feminists which play an important role in the subjugation of women, and they controlled as follows: women's productive or labor power, reproduction, sexuality, mobility, property and other economic resources. There are numbered different perspectives on power. Feminism explains patriarchy as follows. It defines as an institution of power and authority having defined structural through which men dominate, oppress and exploit women. Further, it extends towards the struggle against the totality of oppressive and exploitative relations which affect women and their systematic character. Society directs behavior and helps to shape individuals' lives, while some choose to believe they have chosen their behavior based on individual characteristics, but behavior is socialized rather than by natural occurrence. Individuals should recognize their group identity and understand the male and female role expectations maintained by the society. Indian population follows a rigid caste system which divides people into a hierarchy that governs the distribution of power, status and identity in society. This is according to Macman 2006. The caste system is divided into 4 distinct classes comprised of priests, warriors, artisans and peasants. These 4 classes are vested with spiritual importance because they all derived from different parts of the Hindu god Brahma. Below the 4 castes are the untouchables, also known as Dalits, or in Indian legal parlance scheduled castes. They are officially external to the caste scheme, that is, they are considered to be the outcasts and are seen as lower from one of the 4 Hindu classes. In the contemporary situation, equality of all human beings has been used as a tool to raise voice against states and social institutions which creates power structures of ranks, wealth or privilege among people. The social and political institutions created for the sake of the individual and continue to be for the sake of the good life of the individuals. John Locke, one of the profounder of the social contract theory, argued that life, liberty and property are the 3 basic elements for which civil society and state came into existence. The evolution of democracy added the element of equality and justice in these virtues. India can be characterized by social inequality. Perhaps nowhere elsewhere in the world has inequality been as elaborately constructed as in the Indian institution of caste. Caste has long existed in India, but in the modern period it has been severely criticized by both Indians and foreign observers. Caste has undergone significant change since independence, but it still involves hundreds of millions of people. In its preamble, India's constitution forbids negative public discrimination on the basis of caste. However, caste ranking and caste-based interactions have occurred for centuries and will continue to do so well into the foreseeable future, more in the countryside than in urban settings and more in the realms of kinship and marriage than in less personal interactions. The main religions of the world all contain certain ideas about the appropriate roles for men and women in society, and traditionally this has placed women in the home and men outside the world. This holds true even nowadays, where much change is occurring in societies with increasing female labor market participation and changes in attitudes accompanying this. Religions differ to some extent in this regard, but similar normative claims about men's and women's role are present across all denominations. Nevertheless, data shows that Muslims and Buddhists seem to have less egalitarian gender roles attitudes than Jews. Protestants and Catholics, even when other factors are controlled for Islam in particular, has been criticized for suppressing women, and gender as probably the area where negative attitudes about Islam are articulated more frequently in Western societies. While much of the public discourse seems to equate Islam with gender equality, it is important to note that very different gender roles exist with Islam and that individuals interpret these differently in the context of their own lives. Islamic leaders tend to emphasize that men and women have equal value, but that they have very different roles in the society. Muslim feminists, however, challenge this and demand women to be allowed a public role, whereas men should be more involved in the home and the family, which is similar to discussions in many other societies. Based on the normative role of religion and the predominantly gender conservative teachings of most of the main religions, it can be expected that individuals who belong to a religion will be less democratic than people indicating that they have no religious affiliation. Higher religiosity, both in terms of level of religiosity indicated by the respondent and the frequent attendance at religious services, should equally be associated with more traditional gender role attitudes. Religious attendance is linked to greater exposure to religious doctrine, but also shows that a person is more committed to their particular faith. Although more women than men attend church, reinforce gender stereotypes since many religions have a patriarchal basis. Culture refers to the beliefs and practices of another society, particularly where these are seen as closely linked with tradition or religion. Culture is a part of the fabric of every society, including their own. It shapes the way things are done and our understanding of why this should be so. According to the World Conference on Cultural Policies, Mexico 1982, culture is the whole complex of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual and emotional features that characterize a society or a social group. It includes not only arts and letters but also modes of life, the fundamental rights of the human being, value systems, traditions and beliefs. Gender is related to culture as expectations about attributes and behaviors appropriate to women or men, and about relations between women and men, and in other words, gender are shaped by culture. Gender identities and gender relations are critical aspects of culture because they shape the way daily life is lived in the family, but also in the wider community and in the workplace. Gender functions as an organizing principle for society because of the cultural meanings given to being male or female. This is evident in the division or labor according to gender. In most societies, there are clear patterns of women's work and men's work, both in the household and in the wider society, that is community, and cultural expectation of why this should be. The patterns and the explanations differ among societies and change over time. While the specific nature of gender relations varies among societies, the general pattern is that women has less personal autonomy, fewer resources at their disposal and limited influence over the decision-making process that shape their societies and their own lives. This pattern of disparity based on gender is both a human rights and a development issue. Societies and cultures are not static. They are living entities that are continually being renewed and reshaped. Cultural change occurs as communities and households respond to social and economic shifts associated with globalization. New technologies, environmental pressures, armed conflict, development projects, etc. Change also results from deliberate effort to influence values through change in the law or government policies, often due to pressure from civil society. Over the time, as the disability rights movement has emerged, the concept of disability shifted from individual impairment to more of social phenomenon. In this social view, persons with disabilities are seen as being restricted in performing daily activities due to a complex set of interrelating factors, some pertaining to the person and some pertaining to the person's immediate environment and social or political arrangements. The notion that society has erected barriers, physical or attitudinal, that affect persons with disabilities. Consequently, a number of government programs and policies have evolved to include making the environment and building barrier-free and provide income assistance or work-related supports to help them to participate more fully in the community and at the workplace. Despite these attempts, 100 million disabled persons in India are debarred from full participation in their families, communities and even in societies. The lack of physical access to facilities, transportation and information further circumscribes them from enjoying equal opportunities. With the shift in emphasis from providing welfare assistance to ensure the rights of persons with disabilities, the Persons with Disabilities Act 1995 is no doubt a landmark legislation and an appreciable attempt to alter the disabled scenario in India, yet it falls short in giving clarity on their legal capacity and their rights, making them the most vulnerable, discriminated, subjects of humiliation and exploitation in society. In this backdrop, the various social and legal issues faced by the differently abled individuals and the applicability of existing provisions under Persons with Disability Act 1995 with the of provisions of UN Convention of Persons with Disability Act 2006 will show improvements at appropriate places in the PD Act 2016. Thank you for listening.